We left off with Act 2, Scene 1. We're going to try to finish As You Like It tonight. We might be able to. I had planned on bringing in a DVD of a Globe production, which we definitely then would not have finished, but it completely slipped my mind yesterday. We're in the process of interviewing for a new department chair, and I'm on the search committee, and so my mind is elsewhere. So, picking up with Act 2, Scene 1. We hear for the first time Duke Sr., okay, and his followers. Duke Frederick has been the one in charge for a while. We don't know how long, since he usurped his brother's throne. But we get introduced here to Duke Sr. and the others living in the forest of Arden. Okay? So we see juxtaposed within the play the forest of Arden and the court. Now, traditionally, in literature of this time period, in the Renaissance, the court usually represents civilization, order, reason, culture, okay? And the wood usually represents a wild place, chaos, for lack of a better, not you reason, unreason, might be a little strong, but I'm going to even say barbarism, okay? And you see that idea, by the way, that notion that the wood or mountains and forests, etc., are wild. I mean, you see that up unto early American literature, right? I mean, everybody in here probably had to read what I think is one of the, worst novels of American literature, written by one of my ancestors, Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter. What happens in the wood in the Scarlet Letter? I mean, they get outside of town and, okay? And he's got a bunch of short stories that deal kind of with the exact same thing. In this play, Shakespeare's going to turn that idea on its head. In other words, in this play, Shakespeare is kind of going to, should I go there? Sure. He's kind of going to channel the spirit of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and essentially say, you get away from society and what do you discover? The noble savage. It's society that creates the evil and the ills of humanity. Okay? So look at Duke Sr.'s opening lines. Now, my co-mates and brothers in exile, hath not old custom made this life more sweet than that of painted pomp? Okay? Old custom, that is, our being here and getting used to this kind of life. Well, what kind of life? Does he have servants? I mean, roughing it. Does he have a hot bath drawn for him every day? Does he have somebody to dress him every day? Does he have somebody to prepare all his meals? Well, that part he probably does, okay? But maybe not the other stuff, okay? So, made this life, that is, this life out in the wood, more sweet than what? That of painted pomp. Pomp meaning what? You've all heard of Elgar's Pomp and Ceremony. It's the march that is played when you graduate. Da, 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 da. That thing. Okay? So what's he mean? Is it pompous? No. It just means ritual and ceremony. But look at the the adjective that comes before it. Painted. Painted. What does that mean? Fabricated. Put on. It's not real. It's artificial. Okay? He's kind of creating a distinction between real pomp, that is real worth of worship, real deserving of worship, and the made-up kind. Okay? He goes on. Are not these woods more free from peril than the envious court? See, it should be the other way around. It should be you go into the woods, and what does Dorothy have to confront on her way to the wizard? Lions, tigers, and bears. It's not like the Emerald City, where everything is safe. Here, he says, here, we are more free from peril. Why? Because what is going on at the court? The court is full of, what's the word that just comes before it? Envy. Envy, one of the 7 deadly sins. Okay? Here feel we not the penalty of Adam. What's the penalty of Adam? Fall of man. Okay? That's what Adam did that incurs the penalty. So what happens after Adam's fall in the Garden of Eden, according to Christian theology? They get expelled from the Garden of Eden. They have to live off the land. They have to work for it, and they die. Okay? But Adam, God says, you will earn the bread of your eating. How? Through the sweat of your brow. It'll be hard labor, in other words. And notice, by the way, the imagery. The garden is what? It's a forest. It's a wild place. But it's a wild place before sin, before evil. Okay? They sin, they bring evil in, and then what happens? They leave the garden, and what do Adam's descendants do?
Cities.
They build cities. They build cities. Okay? And what happens in those cities? Rot spreads. Okay? So, here feel we not the penalty of Adam. Is he saying we've somehow found, the Buddhist Shangri-La? Have we found paradise? Do they go off to the wood and suddenly they realize, hey, we're not getting any older. All those aches and pains, they're gone. We're not dying. No, that's not what he means. Okay? The penalty of Adam, partly at least, I think it's what he's talking about, is the infighting among humanity. Okay? They're separated from the court. So, he goes on. And I think here he's explaining really what he, surface level, primarily intends by penalty of Adam. The season's difference, as the icy fang and churlish chiding of the winter's wind. He's saying, it's not as bad as we expected. I mean, today's a pretty cold morning, not like it has been, not like it's going to be in a couple weeks. But he says, which, the wind, when it bites and blows upon my body, even till I shrink with cold. How does he shrink? Because he's doing this. What? I smile and say, this is no flattery. Why? Because what would happen if he were still at court? What does every president really have to contend with and have to be on, because we've only had male, I'm going to use his guard for? Okay, what else? People who... Okay, other than that, people who suck up to him. Who what? Want something. Okay? He's saying, I don't have to deal with that kind of flattery here. Why? The natural world doesn't give a rat's you know what for me.
thought not.
Shut up. The natural world doesn't care about our well-being, does it? Nope. You don't move off to the woods, you know. You don't become Thoreau, leave Concord, go off into the woods, and suddenly a Massachusetts winter becomes warm, like South Florida, like Naples, you know. That doesn't happen. It's still a Massachusetts winter. So he says, I smile and say, this is no flattery. These are counselors that feelingly persuade me what I am. What are the counselors he's talking about? Specifically, the winds. How do they feelingly persuade him what he is? What do these winds tell him?
They're different.
Okay, they're different. What else? He says, they tell me what I am. They tell him, you are mortal. You are human. Okay? What do the other kinds of counselors?
Long live the king.
Long live the king. No, king. You can't die. No, king. Whatever you say is law. Right? I mean, every time there's been a quote-unquote presidential scandal, what ultimately lies behind that? Is it because of something literally the president has done at the beginning? No. It's been something an underling has done. Why? To preserve, protect, and continue the operation of that president. Okay? Somebody who's been trying to essentially get something. Because every one of these hangers-on, they're what? They're parasites. They're ticks on the body politic. Okay? So, he then says, sweet are the uses of adversity. Don't know about you, but I often don't think adversity is all that sweet. I'm driving down the road, a couple of years ago, I was driving up to Nashville to pick up something that I'd bought online, driving up there, and my truck dies. Engine just totally freezes up. That's not a very sweet thing to happen on I-65 at just about the I-65 and I-24-40 split. When you have to get out and push your truck to literally get over, because I was in the left-hand lane. What does he mean, sweet are the uses of adversity? How so? Okay.
Commanding somebody else to do it. It's humbling.
It's humbling. Notice that middle word, uses. In other words, adversity happens, right? There's a bumper sticker that says that. It just doesn't say adversity. So, adversity happens to everybody. Big, small, great, worthless, so to speak. What's he talking about? It's your attitude toward the adversity. It's the use you put that adversity to. Because what can adversity do? 2/4 an individual. It can make him or her a better person. Okay? It can make somebody better. Compare, if you've read the Harry Potter novels, compare Dudley with Harry Potter. How much adversity has Dudley dealt with in his life? Squat. None. Harry, from the moment he was born just about, he's had nothing but adversity. Who is the stronger character? Or, put another way, as one of the novels puts it, who has the greatest strength of character? Harry does. Why? Because when bad things happen to him, what does he do? Does he crumple and fall and roll up into the fetal position and say, not fair, not fair, No, he takes his licks and then gets back up, dusts himself off, and goes on. Should I go there? Well, Shakespeare invites it. This is one of the problems of parents who never allow their child to face adversity. This is one of the problems when, a student, none of you because you're all too old, I think, a student gets a bad grade, tells their parents, and their parent calls a professor or calls a, director of lower division or upper division or the chair of the department or a dean. It happens all the time. Or the president of the university. If I got one of those calls, I'd say, suck it up, buttercup. Tell your kid to suck it up. They got what they deserved. Well, that's part of the problem. The parent has never allowed that. Okay? So, he says, sweet are the uses of adversity, which, like the toad, ugly and venomous, it was a medieval/Renaissance belief, toads were poisonous. Okay? So the adversity is ugly and venomous. Wears yet a precious jewel in his head. The warts and stuff were taken to be or thought to be kind of precious. So Shakespeare is saying adversity on its front looks really bad. And yet what happens when you go through it? You come out on the other side what? What is it, the Carrie Underwood song? What doesn't kill you what? Makes you stronger. So, in this, our life, he means our life here in the wood, exempt from public haunt. Your gloss tells you, haunt, society. Well, okay. I think it's more than that. He's also using kind of the royal we. Our life exempt, cut off from from public haunt, from the people doing what? Always wanting to see who's in charge. You're going to see when we get to a later set of plays, the Henry IV plays. You've got the character of Henry IV, king, okay, who is not all that often in the public eye. And his son, Prince Hal, Harry, as he's also called, is always in the public eye. In fact, people see him always with a big fat man going in and out of bars and whorehouses. And he goes, Harry, this is kind of a problem. People see you all the time. It's the Kim Kardashian presidency kind of an idea. Okay? Or some would say the Donald Trump presidency, because he never gets off Twitter. Yes?
Well, it's interesting that haunt means society, because especially in modern times, the expectations of society can haunt you.
Sure.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Because, we live in an age of what? Stimulation.
Ease.
We don't have it up here. Oh, I'd have to pull down the screen. I'm used to the one-eyed monster sitting here. Okay. Constant. Okay. Imagery. Satisfaction. Headline news, 24/7. Reality TV. So we almost have come to expect our quote-unquote politicians, what used to be in another age called leaders, but we don't like that word anymore, to be what? Constantly in front of us. There's a danger in that. If they were constantly, let's use Trump as an example, if he was constantly in front of us, because some people, have intentionally brought up this image since his election, we would be in what? 1984? And we would have Big Brother smiling or frowning down upon us. This our life, exempt from public haunt, finds tongues in trees. What is he smoking out there in the wood? Books in the running brooks. Sermons in stones. Notice that's a progression. Tongues, speech. Okay. We find speech in trees. What's he mean? We can learn from those things. How do you know? Anybody ever hear of Aesop's Fables? Hear the one about the oak versus the reed? The mighty wind blows, and what happens to the oak tree? Boom! The wind stops blowing. Does the oak tree get back up? Nope. It stays down. What does the reed do? It blows and bends. It bends with adversity, and then it gets back up. Okay? Books in the running brooks. That's like more speech. Speech to fill a book. Sermons in stones. And what? And good in everything. He's saying, by our being here, we've learned that we can see good in everything. What does the everything obviously include? Why is he in the wood? Because he's in exile. He's been kicked out of his job. I think when he says, we can now see good in everything, he can now see the good in his brother taking his place.
Kind of like there's a reason for everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much it. Amiens says, I would not change it. That is, I wouldn't go back. Happy is your grace. Notice, your grace capitalized. Why?
He doesn't recognize the usurping.
Okay, he's still acknowledging the Duke as his Duke, his senior. That is, it's a title. Okay? But I think Shakespeare uses that phrase because he wants us. Yeah. Divine grace. Happy is the grace shown upon you. Okay? That can translate the stubbornness of fortune into so quiet and so sweet a style. In other words, without grace, you wouldn't be able to take this exile the way you are. Okay? He's learned from a lesson, let's say. So, the Duke kind of says, I'm hungry. Should we go kill a deer? And he goes, and yet, I don't really think that's right. Why? This is their home. What are the humans in Arden?
Outsiders, foreigners.
Another word, usurpers. They are like Duke Frederick. Okay?
They always have the decency to admit it, though.
But he has the decency to admit it. It's like that wonderful scene in the film, Last of the Mohicans with Daniel Day-Lewis, when, at the beginning, and they kill the deer, and what do? They pray to the Great Spirit. Thank him, and, to try to ease the spirit of the deer to go on wherever it goes. Okay? And so the First Lord then tells them about Jaques and how he saw a deer wounded and just, bawled over this thing and talked about how unfair it was, etc. So we're going to skip that until you get down to line 58, where the First Lord talks about what Jaques said as a result of the death of the deer. Because more deer came in, a whole herd of deer came in. They saw the wounded deer and just kept on going. Upon that poor and broken bankrupt there, Jaques asks, thus most invectively he pierceth through, that is, the First Lord is now talking about Jaques. He pierceth through, that is, he gets to the heart of the body of the country, city, court, yea, and of this our life, swearing that we are mere usurpers, tyrants, and what's worse, to fright the animals and to kill them up in their assigned and native dwelling place. Jaques, according to this line, or according to this passage, would be like the modern individual, and there are tons of them, who say that humanity is a cancer on the earth. Rid humanity, and what would happen to the natural world? It would heal itself, and it would be what this gets referred to as a little bit later. golden wood. Paradise. All the animals of the world would learn to live in peace. Global warming would completely go away because it obviously has nothing to do with cycles of the sun. It's all man-made. Okay? Da 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 da. So what does that then say about humanity? We're the parasite. Okay? So skip Act 2, Scene 2. Go on to 2-3. Okay? So we go back to the court, and we have Orlando and Adam. Orlando, remember, the youngest son of Sir Roland de Bois, and Adam was his father's servant. Okay? We're going to be told, I marked it in here, I think he says he's 84, or 85, 4.5 I think he says. So, Adam tells Orlando what his brother is planning against him. When, in response to Orlando's, why, what's the matter, around, I don't know, line 14, 15. And he says, come not within these doors, within this roof, the enemy of all your graces lives, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So we're going to skip a little bit and get down to that same page, line 38. Adam gives Orlando a proposal. He says, I have 500 crowns, the thrifty hire I saved unto your father, which I did store to be my foster nurse, when service should in my old limbs lie lame. It's his retirement. And unregarded age in corners thrown, that is, when I'm no longer needed and you guys kick me out of your employ, thrown out on the street. Take that. Take that 500 crowns that I have earned in serving your father / family since I was 17. He's going to tell us. That's how long he served. Okay? Take that. And notice, capital, he that doth the ravens feed, yea, providently caters for the sparrow, be comfort to my age. Take everything I have, and I will trust in God to provide for me. Well, that's essentially what Duke Sr. is talking about happening in the wood. And here we have everything that we need. Okay? All is provided for us. So he offers the gold and says, let me be your servant. I look old, but I'm still strong and lusty. For in my youth I never did apply hot and rebellious liquors in my blood. That is, he didn't get drunk. Nor did not with unbashful forehead woo the means of weakness and debility. And I think, even though your gloss doesn't tell you this, I think he's probably saying, nor did I ever contract any kind of sexual disease. Which affect ultimately what? The brain. Gonorrhea and syphilis affect the brain. Therefore my age is as a lusty winter, frosty but kindly. Let me go with you, I'll be your serving man. Orlando, O good old man, how well in thee appears the constant service of the antic world. Constant, the still, the always, the consistent service of what? The ancient world. He's talking about long ago in the golden age, when service sweat for duty, not for meed. That is, when people served out of a sense of duty, not for mere payment. Thou art not for the fashion of these times, where none will sweat but for promotion. Now, this play is produced, I don't remember, when is this one? It's written sometime late 1590s. It's not published until the first folio in 1623. But I'm pretty sure there's a record of its production right around 1600, 1601. That kind of language is dangerous. Because who is that addressing? It's not addressing the groundlings. You know, the people like Bottom and Peter Quince and Snug the Joiner, not those folks. They're workmen. They get paid for the jobs they actually do. He's talking about courtiers, the hangers-on, okay, of royal society. They do what? They sweat only, that is, they work only for promotion. They're merely in it, why? To climb the social ladder. And having that, do choke their service up even with the having. That is, and once they get their promotion, they say, screw you, to the person behind them, or to the person whose service they've left. Why? No longer important. Not so with you. But, poor old man, thou prunest a rotten tree that can't so much as a blossom yield in lieu of all thy pains. In other words, why do you want to stick with me? Orlando is saying, I'm the rotten tree. Why do you want to stick with me when all the pruning in the world is not going to do what? Result in any new growth. He's saying, what's my inheritance? I have nothing to help you with. I have nothing to benefit you with. But come, we'll go together. He's saying, we'll go together poor, essentially. I mean, other than your 500 crowns. And ere we have thy youthful wages spent, we'll light upon some settled, low content. We will be content with a low life. His father was a sir. He's saying, I won't be Sir Orlando. Just call me little old O. He's showing pretty extreme humility here. Adam, go on and I will follow thee to the last gasp with truth and loyalty. Okay? So, Act 2, Scene 4. Rosaline comes in as Ganymede. Okay? And Celia comes in as Ileana. And they're being led by the clown Touchstone. Okay? Who is dressed in his motley clothing. Motley here, not just meaning multicolored. It's, like wearing the cap that is divided into quarters, blue, blue, red, red kind of a thing. Okay? And she says, "O Jupiter, how weary are my spirits." Why? Because Ganymede in mythology, Greek mythology, was the plaything of Jupiter. Jupiter's kind of little homosexual boy. Okay? So she's addressing her lord, so to speak. Keeping within her role. So, they talk a little bit. Celia is tired and says, "I pray you bear with me. I cannot go no further." In other words, I got to rest. Thank you. And Touchstone says, "For my part, I had rather bear with you than bear you." Okay? Two meanings there. Bear you, carry you on my back. And he might, because Shakespeare loves a pun. Samuel Johnson said Shakespeare never met a pun he didn't like. And especially if it's a sexual pun, which Johnson didn't. Johnson and the Augustans in the 18th century, they didn't like that kind of stuff. I think actually they did. They just didn't want to admit to it. Bear you means having you on top. Okay? "Yet I should bear no cross if I did bear you, for I think you have no money in your purse." So he introduces that idea of bearing a cross. Well, what did Christ say? If you would follow me, take up your cross and deny yourself. So that echoes in these lines. But your gloss tells you something else. What's he referring to, possibly? A coin that has a cross on it. Okay? Rosaline. Well, this is the Forest of Arden. Touchstone. Now am I an Arden. What does he mean? Woo, big frickin' deal. The more fool I. He's saying life over here was better. He is a fool. He is the fool, the jester. He's saying, now I'm even more of a fool for having walked into the forest of art. When I was at home, I was in a better place. But travelers must be content. Okay? So they, yes.
So why did he go with them?
It's a good question. Kind of as a servant. Okay? Lighten their way, lighten their spirits. What's the purpose of a fool or a jester? And bear in mind, not all jesters equal fools, and not all fools equal jesters. Because you do have the idea in medieval and Renaissance literature and in Shakespeare of the holy fool. That is, the person who is touched by God, who sees things maybe the rest of us don't see. And sometimes that person is portrayed as way out there. Another way of putting that is crazy. Like, bet you know what, crazy. Okay? Touchstone is not like that. He's not crazy. Another way to think of Touchstone, okay, is as a satirist. He's the walking, living, breathing onion. Okay? Or what's that other one? There's another one. Can't remember what it's called. That is primarily about Christian stuff. I mean, and it's like the Babylonian Bee or something like that. I mean, they just parody, things that come out of, Jerry Falwell Jr.'s mouth and all these other folks. Some of it's pretty hilarious. Okay? So they keep going on, and they see these other two young men, Corin and Silvius, talking. Okay? And Silvius is in love with a woman named Phoebe. And he leaves, and we hear Rosaline say, "Alas, poor shepherd, searching of thy wound, I have by hard adventure found mine own." She hears him talking about his love for Phoebe, and what does she think? Orlando. She realizes she's got it bad for Orlando. Touchstone. Yeah, me too. I now remember my wound. When I was in love, I broke my sword upon a stone and bid him take that for coming a night to Jane's smile. And I remember the kissing of her battler and the cow's dugs that her pretty chapped hands had milked. And I remember the wooing of a peace cod instead of her, from whom I took 2 cods, and giving her them again, said with weeping tears, "Wear these for my sake. We that are true lovers run into strange capers. But as all is mortal in nature, so is all nature in love, mortal in folly." Okay? What's he talking about? Love is idiocy. That's what he's talking about. Love doesn't make any sense. Okay? Skip a little bit more. Go on down to 75. So Rosaline Rosaline and Touchstone talk with Corin. And Corin says, when they ask, him, can you provide us any help? Can you provide us any shelter? Corin says, "My master is of churlish disposition, and little recks to find the way to heaven by doing deeds of hospitality." Well, what does he mean? Little recks to find the way to heaven by doing deeds of hospitality. Where do we have that word reck today? R-E-C-K. Reckon. Reckon. I reckon means what? I think. I consider. Okay? So, he little thinks, he little considers to find the way to heaven by doing deeds of hospitality. What is meant by doing deeds of hospitality? A 2-word phrase. It's a distinction between, this might be too simplistic, to some degree, Catholics, Protestants. Good deeds, faith alone. Okay? Have I talked about Calvinism in here? I did tulip and all that? Okay. So, I mean, what are some of the tenets? You know, Protestants, 16th century, had three kind of mottos. Faith alone, sola fides, grace alone, gratia, sola gratia, faith alone, grace alone, and I'm drawing a blank on the third one. It's something with Scripture. It's not Scripture alone, but it's something like that. So yeah, it is sola. It is. Sola Scriptura. Scripture alone. Okay? So, faith alone, grace alone, Scripture alone. What does that not include? Obviously. Good works. You're saved by these. That's it. Faith, grace, Scripture. That is, reading Scripture, which fills you by reading Scripture. You kind of invite the Holy Spirit, you get grace, and that develops faith in God. You don't need good works. You don't need a priest or any other intermediary. Okay? So, chuck the Catholic Church, because it's got priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, pope.
But wouldn't Scripture also like include doing good works? Because in Scripture Jesus says like, do the things I tell you.
Jesus does say, do the things I tell you.
So wouldn't that include good works though?
And yeah, well, I would agree. St. James says, faith without works, anybody know the rest? Is dead. Dead. Okay? He doesn't say, weak. Dead. It's nothing. They're what? Faith and works are what? They're the two sides of a coin. They go hand in hand. Matthew 25. What's Jesus talking about when he does the parable of the Last Judgment? He says, here's what's going to happen. Everybody's going to line up, and I'm going to say, to this group, enter on the right side. To this group, enter by the left side. And he's going to say, you fed me when I was hungry, clothed me when I was naked, gave me drink when I was thirsty, visited me when I was in prison. Enter into the kingdom of heaven and the rest that is, granted to you. You didn't feed me, didn't clothe me, didn't visit me, etc., etc., didn't give me drink, etc., etc. You go to hell. And they're going to say, when, Lord, did I do da-da-da-da-da? And he says, inasmuch as you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. Okay? Notice what all of that passage is about. It's not at all about thought. It's not at all about faith. It's not at all about grace. There's nothing in there about, remember John 3:16 and you'll be saved. It's all about what? Doing. It's all active. Everything in it is active. Okay? But these became the mottos. I mentioned the book of James. Martin Luther, quote-unquote founder of the Protestant Reformation, called it the damnable book. Why?
Shot holes in his argument.
It shot holes in it. He didn't like that stuff about good works. Okay, you got to understand why Luther even nailed the 95 Theses up to begin with. He was an Augustinian monk. Augustinian, that is, kind of following St. Augustine. These guys were strict. Really strict. And he came to a crisis of conscience. One time, he left the confessional, confessing to his father priest, and left, and then went right back and said, I forgot something. and then left again. And then he remembered something else. And he came to this conclusion: I can't confess everything because I don't remember it all. And there are some things I don't want to confess. Therefore, he suggested, the whole idea of confession, get rid of it. Doesn't work. Okay? So you've got this idea. Well, this does what? To the Catholic mentality, to the Orthodox mentality, it's part and parcel of faith. If you have faith, you're going to do this. If you don't have faith, screw everybody else. Okay? What did Corin just say? My master is churlish disposition, little recks, little thinks to find the way to heaven. How? By doing deeds of hospitality. He doesn't think this is important. Now, I don't know that Shakespeare is implying this, but I think Shakespeare is implying this. That his master is kind of a Protestant bent. Because a Protestant bent in Shakespeare's day would have that exact same mentality.
You said Shakespeare was Catholic, right?
Shakespeare's family was known to be Catholic. His ancestors were known to be Catholic.
During that time, you didn't say too much about what you were.
Shakespeare never, he never comes out like J.K. Rowling did in an interview when she was asked about 2000, 2001, are you a Christian? She said, yes. Well, what stripe, what flavor Christian are you? There's 22,000 Protestant denominations. And then you have the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, and a variety of others. Okay? She said, well, Church of Scotland, which means Presbyterian, Calvinist. So, this kind of stuff. Right? She was asked, well, how does that inform your work? How does that inform Harry Potter? How does that infill Harry Potter? She goes, well, if I answered that, I'd kind of give away the ending. And nobody paid any attention to that. Because you still had the right-wing wackos coming out of the woodwork, burning her in effigy, burning her books, wanting to condemn her to hell. Okay? I mean, even after the last book came out, a atheist, Jewish reviewer, creative writer said, you killed God in the final book. And she's like, what? He said, he's absent. She goes, he's not as absent as you think he is. She's, working on one level and he was reading on kind of another level. Shakespeare does that kind of thing in all of his plays. He was working multiple levels. Why? He can't. I don't think that he can come right out and make kind of a categorical doctrinal statement. Why? He's trying to reach a wide audience. Not us. The globe. Okay? Because you have members of the upper class who are sitting up there in the top galleries who are probably, some of them, still crypto-Catholics. That is, they act Protestant, but they really believe. And when they go to bed at night, they say their prayers to Mary. Okay? But they just don't practice that way. Why? Because in 1600 you could be killed for doing that. But he's also got those who are, firmly in this group. And they would take anything that smacks of Catholicism as an opportunity to drag him before the Privy Council, which really means haul him off to the Tower of London. We have ways of making you talk, where you can read about some of the tortures that were done in the Tower of London. Not pleasant. Let's just put it that way. So I think this is an example of Shakespeare kind of getting a little idea in subtextually. So, he goes on. Besides his coat, his flocks, pounds of feed are now on sale at our sheepcote. So what does Rosalind say? Go, buy it. Buy his land, buy his sheep, buy his house. I'll pay for it. So Rosalind's got to be loaded, Orlando made a good choice. Act 2, Scene 5. We're not nearly as far as we need to be. So, we see Jaques with Amiens. Amiens sings a song, one of Shakespeare's more favorite ones. It's not unique necessarily Shakespeare. And Jaques kind of makes fun of the song and such. We're going to skip a bunch. Jump to Act 2, Scene 7. We're back with Duke Sr. and First Lord, etc. And Jaques comes in. Okay? And he's all excited. Now, Jaques is I'm going to get rid of this. Jaques is a melancholy, or he is melancholic. What does that mean? See, our society, my opinion, we lack subtlety. We lack nuance in terms of the meanings of words. Most people would say, oh, he's melancholy. That equals he is depressed. No, it's not quite depressed. It means he is of a pensive attitude. He thinks deeply about things. And he kind of tends to see more of the dark than the light. He would see this bottle, which is about 3/4 full, as being more empty than full. Okay? So, he looks at things and takes meaning from them. The meaning is often negative. But now he comes in and he's excited. Melancholy persons don't normally get excited. They're stoic. Their life sucks and then you die, kind of a thing. A fool, a fool. I met a fool in the forest. A motley fool. He's talking about Touchstone. Okay? A miserable world. As I do live by food, I met a fool who laid him down and basked him in the sun and railed on Lady Fortune in good terms, in good set terms. That is precise language. And yet a motley fool. Good morrow, fool, quoth I. No, sir, quoth he. Call me not fool till heaven hath sent me fortune. What? Why call me not fool till heaven hath sent me fortune? Playing on the idea of fortune's wheel. If heaven hath sent ye fortune, he means, call me not fool till I'm here on fortune's wheel. Because what's going to happen? That wheel always turns. Fortune is a goddess. She's the goddess who covers, kind of governs the affairs of men on this earth. So what does that mean? Her wheel, she's always spinning her wheel. Right? It's where we get the wheel of fortune, Pat Sajak, the whole 9 yards. That wheel is always spinning. When you are here on fortune's wheel, what's life like? You're standing at the entrance to 24 with a piece of cardboard that says, out of work, hungry, help. In other words, it doesn't get any worse. When you're like this on fortune's wheel, you're Jeff Bezos. You run the world. Richest man in the world, etc. Yeah. But fortune's wheel keeps turning. It's fortune's wheel. It's not fortune's oval. Or fortune's oblong. Because, fortune's oval could be like this. And you could be here and go all the way away. This would be pretty nice, right? The only problem still is, once you turn here, that's a shorter fall than this is. The idea is, it keeps turning. What goes around, comes around. So, he says, don't call me a fool until heaven hath sent me fortune. Why? Because what's going to happen with that fortune? Going to lose it all. Okay? And then he drew a dial from his poke, and looking on it with lackluster eye, says very wisely, it is 10 o'clock. Thus we may see, quoth he, how the world wags. 'Tis but an hour ago since it was 9, and after 1 hour more 'twill be 11. And so from hour to hour we ripe, and then from hour to hour we rot, and thereby hangs a tale. What's the tale that hangs upon an hour ago was 9, and an hour from now will be 11? Time does what? Flies. And thereby we rot and rot. See, our perception of time is it's kind of slow. But he's saying, you know what? Every moment we are what? Rotting. We are born for what purpose? To die. That's it. You start dying the minute you go, rah! That's kind of like the death scream. It just lasts a long time for most people. And they're unaware of it. He, Touchstone, is saying, I at least know. I am a dead man walking. Okay? Jaques eats this up. I mean, he just loves this. When I did hear the motley fool thus moral on the time, that is, moralize. Draw a moral from it. My lungs began to crow like Chanticleer, that fools should be so deep contemplative, and I did laugh sans intermission, that is, without intermission, an hour by his die. I laughed for an hour. Okay? So Jaques goes on and says, oh, that hour of fool. I would love to have a motley coat. Why? Because fools can get away with everything. They can say things to the people in power and kind of go, I've got the fool's get out of jail card. You can't touch me because of this. Senior, thou shalt have one. It's my only suit, meaning it's the only thing that fits me, provided that you weed your better judgments of all opinion that grows rank in them, that I am wise. I must have liberty. Why? As large a charter as the wind to blow on whom I please. That is, if you're going to give me the fool's clothing, you also have to give me the liberty to what? Say what I want. What's one of the big things going on? Should I even go there? Because we're so close on time. What's one of the big things going on in college campuses and around our country today? It's the right to not be offended. Offended. Andrew has the right, according to this ideology, of not being offended by what I say in class. Bullshit. Okay? This is the one place where everybody ought to be offended, in one way or another. All our precious little balloons. You know. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I want liberty. I want license. To be able to walk up to Trevor and go, well, yeah, Trevor, well, you think this? Well, that's what I think of what you think. Okay? He wants to be able to go everywhere with what he says. He that a fool doth very wisely hit, doth very foolishly, although he smart, not to seem senseless of the bob. If not, the wise man's folly is anatomized, even by the squandering glances of the fool. Anatomized, broken down into their elements. Give me my motley suit. Give me leave to speak my mind, and I will through and through cleanse the foul body of the infected world. In other words, I will make the world a better place. How? Through that. What is the purpose of satire?
To correct vices through comedy.
Yes, it is to correct vices. Okay? So what's the problem? Oh, should I go there? Because some of you are going to really disagree with this. What's the problem when Trump makes some, often what appears to be outlandish statement about a group of individuals? And I don't mean some kind, like a racist thing. I mean, he makes a comment about, a group of politicians without naming the group. What often happens?
Uproar.
Why? Because a group of politicians will stand up and take offense. What are they doing?
They're snitching on themselves.
They're proving his point. That is, the only people who are offended by satire are the people who are being satirized. Why? Because satire does what? As Shakespeare will say in Hamlet, what does a play do? He's paraphrasing Aristotle, by the way. A play holds a mirror up to nature. And if you see yourself in that play, and you see yourself being skewered, then what does that mean? Boy, I'm an ass. I should really try to change this behavior of mine. Because what does satire do? It holds ridicule up to folly. It shows foolishness for what it is. Okay? So, if you don't take the bait, you won't be ridiculed. Duke Sr., fie on thee. I can tell what, in other words, now I know what you're thinking. He just wants to do what? Duke Sr. says, Jaques wants to do what? Kind of like in the Batman film with Heath Ledger as Joker. Remember that great line that Alfred says to Bruce Wayne in response to, what the Joker is doing? Some men what?
Just want to watch the world.
Just want to watch the world burn. He just wants to tear down. Now, he says, yeah, but the purpose is to rid the world of folly. But what has he already said? That's all there is in the world among humans. So, rid the world of the cancer of humanity. It's kind of, Duke Sr.'s like, no, we're not going there. Most mischievous foul sin. Whoa, that's pretty strong language. In chiding sin. What, shouldn't you chide sin? Shouldn't you say, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Don't sleep with your sister. Bad idea, ruins the gene pool. And for thou thyself hast been a libertine, as sensual as the brutish sting itself, and all the embossed sores and headed evils that thou with license of free foot hast caught, wouldst thou disgorge into the general world. In other words, he's saying, you can't do this. Why? Look in the mirror, fool. But Duke Sr. isn't speaking the language of a satirist. He's speaking the language of a moralist. You can't go out there and rail against adultery, you adulterous fool. Jaques. Well, who cries out on pride that can therein tax any private party? Doth it not flow as hugely as the sea, till that the weary very means do ebb? What woman in the city do I name, when that I say the city woman bears the cost of princes on unworthy shoulders? Notice the distinction he's saying. Am I naming an individual woman? Am I saying Amelia? He says, no, I'm just saying the city woman. But what does he mean by that? All city women. Or what is he of basis function that says his bravery is not on my cost, thinking that I mean him? But therein suits his folly to the metal of my spirit. That's what I was just talking about. Those who are offended by what I say are those who ought to be offended by what I say. They are those who my words act as what? Conscience. Or my words awaken their conscience. Okay? So Orlando comes in, sword drawn, says, stop, don't eat anybody. They're like, what gives? And Duke Sr. says, line 102, your gentleness shall force more than your force move us to gentleness. Your gentleness what? Shall move us to gentleness. More than your force. What's he mean? Louder?
Live by the sword, die.
Live by the sword, die by the sword? What else does he mean? Lead by example? So Orlando, speak ye so gently? What's going on in his mind? This is the wood. This is the wild place. You got to be wild. You got to be strong, therefore. Pardon me, I pray you. I thought that all things had been savage here, and therefore I put on the countenance of stern commandment. I thought everybody was wild and outside the law, because they're living hell. It's never insinuated, it's never implied, it's never alluded to. But Duke Sr. is like Robin of Loxley. Why does Robin of Loxley, a.k.a. Robin Hood, live in Sherwood Forest? He's had his lands and title taken from him. Okay? Just like Duke Sr. has. So, he says, I thought you guys were essentially all robbers and highwaymen here. Sorry, dude. If ever you have looked on better days, he addresses the Duke and the Duke's followers. If ever been where bells have knolled to church, if ever sat at any good man's feast, if ever from your eyelids wiped a tear, and know what 'tis to pity and be pitied. If you've ever experienced any of these, what's he getting at?
Court life?
Okay. Could be court life. Is it necessarily court life? Okay. If you've ever looked on better days, that's not necessarily court life. That's just if you've ever lived better off than you are now. That is, you've had something in life. Okay? If you've ever been where bells have knolled to church, that is, in the city, in town. What else? If you've ever sat at any good man's feast, if you've ever been invited into someone's home to break bread with them, if you've ever, from your eyelids, wiped a tear, well, that includes everybody, right? And know what 'tis to pity, and to be pitied means what? To receive pity. Let gentleness my strong enforcement be. He's saying, I've experienced all of these. If you've experienced them also, be gentle with me. In the which hope I blush, and puts away his sword. Duke Sr. True is it we have seen better days, and have with holy bell been knolled to church. That is, the bell has rung, indicating it's time for the service to start. Get to church. Keep in mind, church attendance, Shakespeare's day, required. Required. Tithe, required. Giving it 10% of what you own. And sat at Goodman's feast and wiped her eyes of drops that sacred pity hath engendered. Notice, he changes that pity from just pity to sacred pity. That kind of pity is now holy. Blessed are the merciful. Okay? And therefore, take a seat. We'll feed you. Orlando, no, I can't eat yet. Why? There's an old man who's nearly dead from hunger. Notwithstanding Adam saying, yeah, I'm a lusty man. Yeah, I'm 85 years old. So, they tell him to go, and Orlando leaves, and we hear, thou seest, line 135, thou seest we are not all alone unhappy. This wide and universal theater, what's he mean? What is this wide and universal theater?
The earth.
Human life. That's it. Presents more woeful pageants than the scene wherein we play in. Now, I've heard people say, you shouldn't compare your problems with others. But that's exactly what Duke Sr. is saying. Because what do we tend to do when we are undergoing suffering? The adversity that was talked about earlier.
Self-pity.
Yeah, we think about our own problems, right? What's Duke Sr. saying? But our own problems are not what? The only problems in the world. There are other people with much greater problems than mine, which tend to do what to my sense of my problems? Not as bad. Okay? In the Harry Potter novels, whenever Harry focuses on himself and his problems, something happens. He meets somebody else, he talks to somebody else, he goes to somebody else that causes him to draw outside of himself and focus on their problems. And every moment, every time that happens, it's like a source of healing for him. He loses his anger, he's filled with compassion. Okay? Then we get one of the most famous passages in all of Shakespeare. This is Jaques, the melancholy, delivering what would be a great speech to memorize and recite, since you have to do that to me. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Now, keep in mind, this is occurring where? In a play. This is, not really, but kind of breaking the Brechtian fourth, wall kind of a thing. It's almost like he comes out and says, hey, y'all, we're all on stage here, not just those players. And all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. So the acts of an individual, the play of an individual, is a 7-act play rather than a Shakespearean 5-act play. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. Then, 2nd act, the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail, unwillingly to school. I think Shakespeare is telling us he didn't like going to school. Okay? Why is his face shining? It's been scrubbed. Okay? And then, a little bit older, because that to school would be about the ages of 6 or 7 to about 12. And then the lover jumps up to adolescence. Not 13 necessarily, but, possibly. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. And he brings up there what are called Petrarchan Images, named after the Italian poet Petrarch, who wrote a series of sonnets and verses to this woman he fell in love with that nothing ever happened. She actually kind of really never knew he lived, named Laura, okay, where he describes his love for her as being full of sighs because she doesn't recognize him. He's just, and tears, his weeping for her, and these sighs are like hurricanes, they blast the world. His tears are like floods that drown the world, etc. We're going to see this character later on. It's going to be Orlando. Because what does he do? He walks around the forest and nails crappy verse up to the trees. Okay? Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation. Why bubble? It's fragile. What does every bubble do? It pops. What does he mean by reputation? Fame, honor, glory. We're going to see Shakespeare deal with those issues in the Henry IV plays. Seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. That is, as cannon fodder. Knowing he's going to his death. And then the justice, in fair round belly that is fat and stuffed, with good capon lined, with eye severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws, that is, sayings, and modern instances, applying those sayings to modern cases of court. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon as the body starts to waste. With spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again to childish trebled pipes and whistles in his sound as he breathes. last scene of all that ends this strange, eventful history is second childishness. In other words, babbling, wedding oneself in mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Without teeth, without eyes, without taste, without everything. Death. That, to Jaques, is human life. How's it end? The rest is silence. As Hamlet says. And then he dies. Okay. We'll stop there. It's 9:23. Obviously, we did not get through this one, but we will finish As You Like It on, what day is today? Today's Tuesday? On Thursday. And